Here's a hot take. I'm a media person. I've done this my whole life. And I think it would be easy for somebody like myself to be like, well, I get on this podcast and tell people not to touch the media accounts, and for that to be like a scary thing. But I don't think that's what it is at all. I feel like the opportunity for myself and for anybody else out there in the media team, in the media world, is to actually think about how we get ourselves more closely connected to finance and follow the thread all the way through. Wiring all this data together is the only way.
This episode of the DTC Hotline is brought to you by Chargeflow. Chargebacks cost merchants billions every year in lost product, lost revenue, and lost time. Chargeflow automates the entire process, end to end. Instead of wasting hours collecting screenshots and filling out bank portals, Chargeflow uses AI to fight disputes for you and wins up to 4x more than manual efforts. Join over 15,000 merchants protecting their revenue with Chargeflow. Right now, you can try it free for 60 days. Check out the link in the show notes to start saving money, time, and sanity today.
Hey folks, welcome to the D2C Hotline. This is your direct connection to hot takes, cold truths, and real e-com advice from some of the best in the business. I'm your host, Richard the Professor Gaffin. Call or text 866-DTC-2263. Get your burning e-com questions answered. That's 866-382-2263. Leave a voicemail. Shoot us a text. Ask whatever's on your mind D2C-wise. Our operators are standing by. And speaking of operators, let me introduce them to you right now. Coming in live from beautiful Newport Beach, California, we have Mr. Tony Chopp, the Chopper, our VP of Paid Media here at Common Thread, ready to answer your questions. Tony, what's going on, man?
Oh, let's see. What's going on today, Richard? Well, we were chatting about the Choppers going through a move, and I think we've passed peak chaos. We're on the downswing now. Things are starting to get put together, so feeling good.
That's great. Chopper chopping up the house, I guess, doing a reno, right?
Yeah, exactly. We did tear it apart. It's getting put back together.
One damn thing after another. All right. And of course, joining me is Mr. Luke Austin, the Weatherman here, who's our VP of e-commerce strategy here at CTC. Luke, what's going on, man?
Oh, doing all right. Got a little sickness running through the fam, a little back to school, just that time of year. But I've had some epiphanies this week as I've been reflecting on this call. So I'm excited for this conversation. I think some things have been settling. So yeah.
That's right. Okay, well, good to hear. Nothing heals a cold like a hot take. All right, let's jump to our first question here.
Hey guys, I've heard really great things about the D2C Hotline, so I wanted to try it out myself. My question is around creative, and obviously scaling creative production is a huge issue for pretty much everyone right now. Do you have any tips to making that happen? Our brand's really struggling to produce enough differentiated creative, and I'd appreciate any help here. Looking forward to your feedback and any insights that you have. Thanks.
All right. Who's taking this one?
Nano banana. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I think we've seen I think we have 2 to 3 examples of brands that are doing this really well. Out of the 300 that
over the last 10 years or so,
yeah. Who we actually would point to for ourselves and say this is the standard and this is what it looks like. And there are ones that we've mentioned in conversations before. I think a good specific example is Loop Earplugs. And if you go into their ad library, they have between 2,000 and 3,000 active ads live. They have diversity of creative format in the midst of that very high volume. They have specific landing page destinations and messaging on site relative to each of those funnels. It's sort of the thing that we all see as, that's what the standard looks like. Now, how that gets achieved is a really challenging thing to the question that we just had called in, and we haven't seen a very specific structure of, okay, to achieve the sort of volume of creative output that we all believe is necessary in the standard, which is like 1,000 new ads, right? Not like I'm going to launch 50 or even 100. And then to do that with a diversity of formats becomes challenging. So we haven't seen a very streamlined, the people who do this they built out in-house teams. Here's the 3 pods of the teams. Here's the structure, and here's the most efficient way to do it. We've seen a myriad of approaches. But I would say that the most consistent thing that we see is that to enable diversity and high volume of creative output, you're going to need diversity of creative production or creative sourcing. That's consistent, which is there are multiple teams and vendors and agencies providing creative. Each of those partners provide creative in a different format and type. So that gets you at the diversity, right? Because one's really good at creator content and the production there. One's really good at branded still and motion graphics. One's really good at whitelisting and meme style creative, and you go down the line. And so you get the diversity by working in those different avenues. And then that also enables high volume. That also enables high volume output because you have just a lot of different sources that you're working with it. And then the third piece I'd add in is the structure. Typically at that high of a volume, some sort of incentive-based structure where it's percentage of spend against the creatives and ability to scale up against it is the incentive that aligns both sides on what they're after. So that's what we're trying to build out on our side to be able to enable our partners with. That's what we see as being important is you have multiple sort of teams or sourcing for different creative production types. So that we have that through our creator content and our core creative offering and our AI creative. And then in terms of the structure, moving to more variable performance based where we're only going to get paid on the creative if it gets spent in your account against your min ROAS or cost cap target set, that incentivizes both sides to produce as much creative volume as possible. So diversity of production sources, diversity of creative sourcing is important to be able to enable that in terms of what we've seen of the brands that have set the standard in that category.
Yeah, totally. And this is a point we've made a couple times, maybe on some of our other podcasts as well, is that like basically if you try to rely on one team or one sort of core creative group to build your creative, not only are you obviously not going to get the volume you need, but also the same creators tend to produce the same types of things. Like no matter sort of how hard they try to make two very, very different stills or what, like they may be able to do that on kind of a small scale. But generally speaking, most creators have like a voice, no matter how flexible they are. And so it ends up being kind of similar. So if you want kind of a diversity of even the same types of creative, like the stills or UGC or whatever the case may be, finding more creators to do it is the kind of the key here. So Tony, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think this represents like a resourcing question and like how you're allocating your investment. And it just, I think it strikes me as interesting, and it has for some time, especially with, more younger, smaller brands, how much money they're willing to shovel over to Mr. Zuckerberg, on a daily or monthly basis without really any concern necessarily other than the ROAS and the return, versus like how much money or resources or energy they're willing to invest in the fuel that enables that whole thing. So, and I really think this is a function of like performance, the history of performance media, like in general, and the sort of archetype of the media buyer as the enabler of this whole system. And I think we're seeing it change. Like I honestly think we're seeing the landscape like shift underneath our feet.
Yeah.
The sort of tactical, media buying, do this in the account, do that in the account. Like it just keeps getting chipped away by automation and technology. And I think it's honestly for the best, really. Like, especially when you think about how we approach the problem, like when we approach the problem of, what do we do in a media account? Like, well, fundamentally we get smart. The media account's like the end node of the system. We're going to get really smart about the unit economics of the business, what they're trying to achieve, and then get smart about how incrementality and measurement, and the last piece of the puzzle is like what we do tactically in the account. So to the caller's question, like my question back to her would be, last month or last year or whatever, how much money did you invest in media? Like how much money did you spend on meta ads, and how much money did you invest in creative? creative production, creative sourcing. Maybe money's the right answer, right question. Maybe time would be another way to frame it if it's a small brand and they're doing it. It's somebody that's doing it themselves. And my contention would be that the balance is probably not right in the scale make the things. So in last point here, I know I'm kind of hitting a bunch of them, but if you were to ask me today, like how to architect the media team or the performance team of today and tomorrow, the answer to that question would be several things that I feel like might not have been the answer a couple years ago. And number one is I'm going to architect the team with people that can actually generate content, that can actually create things, because it's fundamental. So resourcing.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like potentially an analogy for this is like media buying is a little bit like turning on an amp, and the creative is a little bit like playing the guitar. And I think that there's maybe been an over-indexing right now on we need people who know how to tweak the knobs on the amp and flip it on, rather than people who need to know how to play the guitar right, or something like that, right? Where there's just more emphasis on these sort of technical aspects that aren't actually the main thing. So beyond like just Loop earplugs, what are other examples of just like characteristics? So like Luke, you had mentioned like the kind of one overriding thing is having a diverse like set of creators. But in terms of like building out the system, like why have so few people cracked it? Is it that difficult to find a lot of different creators, or like what's
it's labor intensive and resource intensive. It's time. It's very time intensive and it's very costly. That's why.
Yeah. And so a specific example of that is so take one microcosm, which is creator content lo-fi video assets. So that's what our creator content offering is focused around. So that's one sub format type of like, 50 different types of creator. That's one. So within that, we have a team of folks here at DTC that interact with our customers, identify the opportunities for creator content fits in, report on the performance of those ads, identify net new ads that need to be created based on the different angles and funnels. Then we have a network of content creators, which are the folks that are actually being shown in each of those ads. That's like 100x times the amount of people. It's not that much. It's like 20, 30x times the amount of people we have internally, right? That represents that network of folks that we need to, based on the brand and the demographic and the content type, then need to reach out to those individuals, get the content from them, source the product to them, etc. So there's just a lot of people in that process, and that's to create lo-fi creator content, specifically video format, one of 50 different creative types. And the sort of resource and people intensity isn't the same between all the formats for sure. But to Tony's point, that is a big dynamic of it, which is you have someone that has experience creating VO ads that work for personal care DTC brands where you have certain claims that you have to skirt around and things like that as well. Like that's a very specific skill set to be able to produce that at this point in time. And if we haven't seen one individual where they can produce all 50 types of creative format in a really diverse way at a high volume, right? There's just a lot of labor there, and there's a lot of nuance in terms of the perspective and output needed to be able to go that way. The other thing I'll add is at different rates of size and growth for brands, there's always the tension of in-house versus agencies versus other partners. And so what that does is it makes it, there's not like a point in time where it's like, oh, great, like let's build this all in-house now. So we can go and build out a 30-person content team full with content creators and designers and AI experts. And like you just like have everyone, like that takes a very long time and is usually some sort of gradual process. And in the midst of that, you're like, okay, I think we've got like our branded evergreen in-house content handled, but these other creative formats we don't, so we're going to outsource those. And so it's more Frankenstein over time than anything. That's why people just have really different resourcing structures, is because it's not a clear like, you're this size, here's your creative resource structure, you're this size. It's like a gradual sort of flowing thing. Everyone ends up with sort of like a Frankenstein, the monster of Frankenstein, not Frankenstein the boy. It ends up with that as the creative sort of output engine that then is the thing to contend with and try to work around. And the monster of Frankenstein is interesting. There's a lot of cool things that come out of it, but pretty unpredictable. So that's the parallel.
Exactly. Tony, anything to add?
No, I'm still stuck on this same idea in my head. Like for the caller, like how much money did you give to Meta last year or last whatever and Google Ads? And how much money did you how much time and money did you invest in the sourcing of the fuel for those things? And if you're like 80-20, you're out of balance.
Yeah. What does the balance look like? 50-50?
I think it's shifting.
You need more?
I think it's shifting significantly. And I think the work that we're doing with our like creative demand module and understanding like analytically the volume of creative that's required is in a lot of cases, Luke, I'd be curious if you agree or disagree with the sentiment. It's sort of like startling. Like, oh, that's how much we need. It's a lot. And I just don't think people are being honest with themselves about what, in a lot of cases, like what level of resourcing or energy is required to actually get there. Mm-hmm. And I think to add to that, I think here's another thing that's like a truism. Almost every ad account I've ever looked at over however many years is like an 80-20 principle, where like the majority of the results are happening from 20% of the ads that have ever been in the account. Yep. So it's like, it's almost like you're getting lucky. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And what we're basically framing out for our brands is like, hey, if you don't want to just like do this as a crapshoot, this is actually what it would take from a creative volume standpoint. And sometimes people look at us and they're like, yeah, right.
Yeah. And we don't have creative offerings that are gonna be able to supply every creative need for every customer. We have a couple that are really effective. They help. But what we do have is the tools to be able to give clarity on what that demand needs to be. And so like Tony was mentioning, the creative demand, like we can see this across our clients of how much ad spending you're trying to get to, what is the creative net new ads that you need to create against that. And like we can look at every example. For every brand, it's different. The amount of creative that you need to be able to get to the spend target, because your degradation of efficiency is different, the amount of evergreen ads that you have running, the metrics that we look at in the models. But as an example, for a brand spending, let's call it $300,000 a month in ad spend, that needs 200 new ads created for that month, then that's 30,000. Then you just sort of apply a production cost against that. And if for 200 ads, your average cost of production is $150 per ad, which may seem high, but if that's a true mix of, video creative, creator content, whitelisting, articles and publishing, statics, motions, like a true blend of those things, then some are, $100, $150 an asset, maybe that's $20,000 to $30,000 a month in creative costs against your ad spend. So 10% of your ad spend, what the budget is, that go into the creative cost. Now that's just one example, a sort of rough heuristic, but that's sort of why like the percentage of spend structures as well, where if to do this at 10% of spend and get unlimited creative, or like a much higher volume of creative, or 7 or 8% of ad spend, and then you're under this sort of 10% threshold, like that, this is what's necessary. Typically what we see is this will be all over the place, but it tends to lean the other direction of like, oh yeah, we'll make like 50 new ads. If we spend 10 grand on creative production this month, that's pretty good, right? Well, it depends on the budget, but in this case, no, that's a third of what you need to allocate.
If you're still fighting chargebacks manually, you're doing it wrong. With Chargeflow, merchants automate the entire dispute process. From Shopify to Stripe, Chargeflow plugs in, collects evidence, builds the case, and submits it automatically. No more late nights at bank portals, no more disputes slipping through, just clean automation and real results, with merchants recovering 4x more revenue compared to manual handling. See for yourself. Try Chargeflow free for 60 days at the link in the show notes.
Right. So just to tie a bow on this conversation, then, I mean, it sounds like basically what like the overall suggestion for our caller and others is this is about reprioritizing creative production, basically, and like really actually embracing the idea that getting creative production and creative diversity is actually the most important thing. The other thing that things that you're spending your time on are maybe not quite, like, particularly by which I mean like making little tweaks in the account or whatever. Like those things are just not priorities in the same way. But it seems like it's just sort of maybe psychologically difficult for people to figure out how to get to that place or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Think about it. Like let's play it out practically. Let's just say it's a smallish brand. Spend maybe let's say $30,000 a month on Meta, right? Happily. Cool. Here you go. Mark, $30,000. My goodness, it's a lot of money. but the psychology of it's so interesting. Yeah, it's great because you look at it. Oh, ROAS, and frankly, sales for your business. But what I'm suggesting is like literally figure out, $30,000 a month. This is a brand that's not super big. You shouldn't have like crazy OpEx. Hopefully you don't have a really expensive office, like a bunch of like payroll and headcount and everything else. Hopefully you're pretty lean and sharp. Instead of giving $30,000 to Facebook next month, give them $15,000 and go put $15,000 into net new creative production, and then just keep going. Put the energy over there. Move it. Now, you're going to get back to $30,000 a month, and you're going to get past that. What you're going to do in that process is you're going to build the muscle that creates the fuel that gets you from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 to et cetera.
Right. All right, cool. Let's shift gears here and jump to our next call. Here we go.
Hey, y'all. Love all the information that you've been dropping. So I'd really like some insight into this. I have a client who has been asking about incrementality and iROAS, and I've been trying to explain it to them. I know a decent amount about it because I've had extensive training into it, but I can't seem to get the point across to them on the importance. What would the simplest way, in your opinion, be to explain to a client the importance of incrementality and iROAS and why they should keep this in consideration when we run their account?
All right. I got one. So I've been floating all these different metaphors for how to do this. Try this one on for size. Okay. So the media platforms, they all have measurement, right? Like ROAS or output. They say, this is what you're getting. They all have it. Use for measurement. Let's use the metaphor of a scale. You step on a scale and you weigh yourself, right? Now, when you step on a scale, like, a scale like can be like little tweaky, right? So picture the scale, but it's at McDonald's, okay? And the scale is at McDonald's, and they're like dialing the scale back a little bit. Like, yeah, it's cool. Mm-hmm. Have another Big Mac. So my other way of saying this, which hasn't been as popular as the media platforms all lie.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, it's not like a super familiar idea to have this idea of a measurement, but then to have like distrust in the measurement, and that's fundamentally what exists. There's this distrust, right? Scales at McDonald's, they got their finger on the scale because whatever. Anyway, the core idea of incrementality is really, really simple. We just take their scale out of the equation. We just measure the impact on revenue. We run media in one area, we withhold it from another area. We measure revenue. The revenue that hits your Shopify store, hits your bank account. So take that out of the equation, the media platform's measurement. Then when we do this measurement of how the revenue moves based on running media or withholding media or whatever else, we get like what we believe to be as a true or a more representative measurement. Then we do a bunch of fancy math to like relate the two and sort of get like, all right, well, the McDonald's scale example, we tested it. We went to the doctor. Okay, the doctor scale said I was 200. The McDonald's scale says I was 150. When we go and stand on the scale at McDonald's, we know we got to add 50 pounds to it because they're
right.
Any good? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a complex idea. I'm trying different things.
The analogy that comes to mind is like the one of like you buy meat at the butcher, and they sort of like behind like put the finger on the scale a little bit so they can get away with giving you a pound, but sell you 1.15 or something like that. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is that fundamentally the algorithm and the people at these platforms are incentivized to overreport, and that's sort of what the incrementality measurement. And in some cases, underreport as well, which as the case may be. So maybe it's a little bit more complex than just they're being dishonest, but it is like their scales are weighted, aren't set up to measure what's actually happening for your business, maybe.
Another way we've been thinking about it too is, which we actually we'll have a tool soon in Statless that helps to show this for brands, is risk that exists in your current media mix currently, the risk of what to the upside and the downside of the investment in your dollars. And so how we think about that is the platform is saying this much revenue is attributed against this much spend. And each of the platforms does that, right? Here's how much being attributed. We know that the true incremental revenue after the post geo hold test is going to be different than that, to the upside or downside. And there's a pretty wide margin of error. And so what we're doing with this tool is showing, based on our incrementality tests, what is the highest incrementality that channel could live at. That's the upside that exists. And what's the lowest incrementality? And then your platform attributed revenue is probably somewhere in between those numbers in terms of the incremental impact. So if your Google non-brand functions at the highest level of incrementality, the highest test we've ever seen, if you're at the 100th percentile, then this could be the revenue outcome. If you're the lowest incremental of any test we've seen, you could be at this outcome. And we look at that for every channel and then quantify that amount to say, if all your channels are the most incremental we've ever seen in our test, you could be actually getting this much incremental revenue. This is the risk if you were to turn off this channel or aggregate channels. Now, if you're on the lower end of the incrementality, this is how much revenue you're actually driving from these channels against your spend, which likely is getting close to the place where it's uncomfortable from a profitability standpoint, to then use as a way to help better answer this question. Because I think that's the tension, is sort of like, okay, what's the impact of getting clarity on this? What's the impact of investing in these tests? So our media investment risk tool will be out at some point, which helps to do this. But like, I guess the simplest way that I would put it is, if you don't know what efficiency your media channels are actually performing at, so you don't know where the next best dollar is to be allocated, that lack of clarity is costing some risk right now to the business, to the upside or the downside, that we need to get clarity on to make an investment decision.
Right.
Side note: people have been doing this forever, since the history of advertising. So, and I'm pretty sure this is what Amazon just did when they pulled out of Google Shopping wholesale across the U.S. for a month. And it was actually pretty clean. It was almost like exactly a month that they just stopped running Google Shopping ads. And that is an incrementality test. Now it's pretty extreme. It's sort of Amazon style, but that's what it is. So they're trying to understand the impact of that investment. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can stop making it. And that's all incrementality testing is.
That's interesting. Actually, yeah, that's not a bad point in terms of helping people understand this, because like that is what they used to do with magazine advertising in the 60s or whatever.
It's been around forever. We just have now we call it incrementality testing.
Yeah, right.
It's like, do a thing, try to figure out the impact of it, or don't do a thing and try to figure out the impact of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Luke, you want to take a crack at a metaphor? Tony's head is shut.
I don't know how I'd follow either of those metaphors up. I think we got enough metaphors.
Right, great. That's enough metaphors. we're very literal people here at CTC. All right, let's go to our next one here.
Hey, DTC Hotline. I'm really excited to be calling in, hopefully having my question answered today. So I'm curious how you'd approach forecasting and operating a brand that has a longer time to purchase. For example, if the ad dollars I spend today don't influence revenue until 2 months from now, I'm just curious how you guys would handle forecasting a business like that, as well as operating just day-to-day optimizations in the ad platforms. Thanks.
So this is a little similar to a question we had last week, which is around AMER and how you think about it relative to like a higher LTV brand or whatever. But let's talk about the specifics of this caller's question, which is around forecasting and like day-to-day operation of the ad platform.
Yeah, so the simplest answer is get clarity on what your initial order value is, and then get clarity on what the LTV is against that in whatever time frame you're trying to capture the value. So if we're trying to capture value within 60 days and we're willing to extend our media investment up until that time period, then initial order value day one, what the LTV is over a 60-day period, multiply that by that, and then now you know what the value is going to be, and be able to back into the media budget based on the profitability. Because there's like look at what the value of a customer is in 12 months, but most people, like, the cash flow doesn't allow for extending that far, right? So it really is a question of, like, you have an initial value and then you have the 30, 60, and like maybe the 90 day, like, you're willing to extend out there. So get cleared on each one of those. Now, it can feel different if you have, like, let's give two examples. You have a supplements brand that is $30 AOV, and then within 90 days they have a 35% increase in LTV. So you're like, okay, great. I have my AOV of $30, and then I 1.3x that over the course of 90 days. So that customer's worth $41.57 or whatever the number is. Okay, now I know what that is. I'm willing to go break even in 90 days, and that's my ROAS target. It can seem more convoluted, and it does get a little more challenging if you have brand where you have longer lead time to an actual purchase. So that would be like high AOV, where you're doing sending samples out to customers. So whether this be furniture or home goods or much larger ticket purchase items, where there's actually multiple steps in the consideration cycle before getting the purchase, that full order value. But the mechanics of it should work the same, which is, okay, we have a sample costs X much. Maybe the customer pays $5 for shipping to get the free sample or whatever. So that's the value of that order to me within the first month. And then of all the sample orders, this is the conversion rate expected from sample to purchase, and this is the AOV of those customers. And then it happens within this time frame. And the math is pretty similar to AOV, supplement brand, LTV, and 90-day period of sample to then what's the average order value. It's just taking one step back in the equation. Really, the thing you're needing to get to is what's the conversion rate of sample to orders within 60 days or 90 days or whatever you're willing to extend out to, and then you can math back into, great, here's what the media investment should be, and here's what my target is to be able to go pay for a new sample, new initial order against that, and then drive the volume as much as possible from that point.
Yeah, I think so. Like, if we're talking about like long conversion window or long consideration window, let's use an example of like high AOV. Like Luke mentioned, furniture. We've had several other clients with multi-$1,000 AOVs. I think to the caller's question about like day-to-day media sort of tactics, it puts even more onus on not doing that. And having, back to what Luke was talking about, having a high level of confidence in the understanding of the math on how you arrived at the targets that you want to run on any given channel. But all the more reason why, if you're attempting to evaluate like your meta spend for anything less than a 7-day click window, especially in a high AOV situation, like you are looking at noise, not signal, 120 million %. And it gets even more challenging on the Google side, I think, with the default out of the box like 30-day click attribution window. So I think my advice, if I was going to be really practical about this for a brand that's like really high AOV, do what Luke said, understand the unit economic mass to get to the targets, potentially consider looking at longer attribution windows in your media platforms, but you're going to have to understand the incrementality of doing that. And then I would consider you to work in some sort of rhythm as far as how you approach tactical changes in the media buying account. So for example, we're gonna make these changes on Monday. We're gonna come back next Monday and evaluate and potentially make some changes again tactically at that point. But if you're in there tweaking and twiddling in between those 2 points in time, you're just chasing your tail.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question, just to like zero in on this caller's particularly phrasing, which was around day-to-day optimizations. And it sounds like in some sense, generally speaking, like maybe that's not generally recommended, even if you are like, or even if you're not one of these long tail brands. But
this goes back to the previous conversation we just had. Stop touching the media account.
Yeah.
Go figure out new creative stop it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And if there's just like less pressure maybe to like make the sale today, so to speak, maybe that gives you like a little bit of leeway to actually spend your time thinking more long term.
We screwed. I shouldn't say you're already screwed, but if you're already in the spot where you're like, today I need this thing to happen, you're already in such a reactive state that you're like missing the forest for the trees. You're missing what Luke's talking about around getting clear with targets. You're missing what I'm saying around you can't treat the media platforms that way on a high AOV, long consideration cycle, 7-day click window setup. Like you've already missed. So take your L, okay, and get yourself settled into a rhythm and a routine. Trust your math. Set your targets. Go make creative.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that feels like a nice segue into our kind of final segment of the day. Now, we tried this last week. And I think we're going to do it again, which is a quick visit to Hot Take Corner. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Tony. Or maybe, well, who feels like they have a hot take first? I'll throw it out there.
I'll share the epiphany that I alluded to.
Oh yeah, of course.
And what this is, I think there's so I'll just say, which is without a system that directly connects the financial outcome that businesses are after to the day-to-day marketing activities, I really don't know how people are able to function effectively. And it's a very self-serving comment because that's our whole thing, right? And trust me, there's weeks when it hasn't felt that way, where we see opportunities to push more into the growth and new creative offerings and marketing moments and things that we wish we could sort of play more in those spaces. And we're building things to be able to sort of engage in a more helpful way there, hopefully. But as it relates to bridging marketing and finance and giving clarity on what that looks like, I do think what we have built and are continuing to build is a necessary function. I'll give 2 quick examples. One is we're just having a conversation with a brand who, coming into September, had a specific revenue and contribution margin expectation in mind for their business. And so we set out in the conversations, the contribution margin was going to be one of, if not their highest contribution margin outcome of the year in September, and sort of build up that way. Pretty quickly into the month, what the brand started experiencing some challenges related to cash flow, inventory, purchasing ahead of Q4, and without the ability to be able to look at how our contribution margin was pacing to goal, how the revenue is pacing, and the total sales volume, we wouldn't be able to identify how much we should be spending on Meta and Google tomorrow and at what target and what creative to deliver that outcome. Because to be clear, each of the different scenarios that we had discussed and aligned on would have been good scenarios. 380, a higher contribution margin than any month in the year. But the problem was the main business objective to set us up for Q4 was to produce more cash flow, to purchase inventory, et cetera, which actually was a trade-off in lower contribution margin this month for higher cash flow that then has a direct function on, now we're going to have a lower AMER target. We take our incrementality against that, and we have our media channels that we have the budget set to and the targets, and we're actually pushing more volume into Google non-brand campaigns as a result, and we're investing more into creative output to scale up Meta. Totally different actions that we're heading into today and into the weekend than we would have if we want to prioritize a higher contribution margin this month that has massive downstream impacts to the business. Yeah, I'll stay with just that one example. I give a couple others, but all the way from the cash flow, the business outcome, business goal, what we're after, to cash flow considerations, along with the profitability considerations, to okay, what should the budget allocation be? What should each of the daily targets be? And what should we be doing in terms of creative investment? And how should we be investing in the ad accounts on a daily basis? It's all so connected. And without a system to unify those things, that what you're doing in your media channels, which are driving a large chunk of your revenue, could be completely disassociated with what you actually need for your business outcome in a crucial time like September, where it's challenging, things tend to be tighter, we're ramping up prior to Q4, there are inventory considerations, etc. So they need to be connected. I guess that is the summary. Marketing and finance and the connection between them two is crucial, or these things get missed.
Yeah. So real quick, I feel I need to ask. So obviously this is something we've talked about for a while. What was the epiphany, or like why did this trigger an epiphany this particular or recently?
I'm trying to think of a metaphor that drives it home. It's like when you're just so deep in something, like you're like 10 levels deep into it, right? And then you like take a step back out, and like when you're 10 levels deep, and we're working on a prioritization tool for our incrementality platform to help with your measurement roadmap and prioritizing which channels to test based on the incremental marginal return. We're like, that's where we're at in a lot of conversations of the things we're doing, that sometimes it's necessary to sort of like, that I think where the epiphany came from, right? Is like, yes, all these tools, the system and our team serving the business outcome of the businesses that we're working with. And when it comes together so clearly there, where it's a new customer that we haven't worked with prior, or we're just starting out, and we see the connection of, wait a second, if that's your stated business goal, the plan for Meta and Google this month should be completely different than what you're currently planning, when it comes together so crisply like that. And I think new customer relationships especially is when it tends to come to light, because we're working through a lot of these higher level conversations together. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe I've been sick at home with the kids some days this week, and it was just like, hey, I'm actually like, this Dayquil is kicking in, and yeah, exactly.
Totally. All right, cool. All right, so Luke's hot take, to distill it down, is connect marketing and finance of your business will basically not be able to function. Now let's pop over to Tony. Tony, what's your hot take?
Can't be hotter than that.
Yeah.
That may be the most lukewarm take of this whole thing.
I don't know how hot this is going to be. It might be super hot.
That's what we're looking for.
No, but it's like a parlay from what Luke's saying, which is like we're watching this. We're watching this thing collapse, and not collapse in a bad way, but collapse in a good way. And this idea that, I don't know how much we're talking about this in public yet, but this idea of a profit engineer or a person at CTC that is wrapped in this exoskeleton, if you will, of this tooling, this statless, and the models and the forecasting, and Luke's newest brilliant brainchild around this incrementality. What the hell are we calling it? Media risk model, or whatever it is. Luke's the guy who names stuff around here. Anyway, we're seeing it collapse into this person augmented by this tooling. And what I mean by the word collapse is that the closer your relationship is to all of these things, all the way up to the P&L at the business, through the forecasting and modeling and planning and the distribution of the media through the MMM, all the way down to the tactical execution in the media channel, the closer the relationship is, the more a single individual has a view on that whole thing, the more effective we believe it's going to be, and we're already seeing it. And to Luke's point about this thing, like, you can't know what to do in the media channel, or you may be doing the totally wrong thing without this contextual knowledge of what the business is trying to do and why they're trying to do it. So I think the future feels like, listen, here's a hot take. I'm a media person. I've done this my whole life. And I think it would be easy for somebody like myself to be like, well, I get on this podcast and tell people not to touch the media accounts, and for that to be like a scary thing. But I don't think that's what it is at all. I feel like the opportunity for myself and for anybody else out there in the media team, in the media world, is to actually think about how we get ourselves more closely connected to finance and follow the thread all the way through. And I think, it's a bumpy road, but I think the pathway that we're on at CTC, like wiring all this data together, is the only way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but that's what I believe.
Well, I mean, the idea that the ecosystem, maybe we could distill into this, Tony's hot take being that, like, the media ecosystem, or the e-commerce ecosystem as it's existed for the last 5-10 years, whatever, is starting to radically and fundamentally transform and collapse, as you say, into this other thing completely. And you kind of have to get on the boat, or you're going to get left behind. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's really cool opportunities again, back to Luke's point before. I can't imagine how you would do this thing like without being wrapped in the exoskeleton or the system that we're building. Like, I have no idea how you would. It would be impossible. But with the super suit, we can't. We've been calling it something else here internally, but we can't say it. We'll get sued. With the profit engineer in the suit that sits around them, we believe that we're going to be in the best position to connect the line all the way through.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, hot take, join CTC, or otherwise you're going to get left behind. I think that's sort of what we're saying here. Well, it's a CTC podcast. What can we say? All right, folks. Well, if you want to learn more about that and kind of some of the service things that are coming down the pike for us, commonthreadco.com, hit the hire us button. We would love to chat with you if you're an 8 and 9 figure business. Now, I think we'd be remiss. We talked a little bit about this last week after we finished recording, but I should contribute a hot take as well. Not that I necessarily, because I'm not in the work in the same way as you guys are, not that I necessarily have an e-com take, but I can do a random hot take to fill out Hot Take Corner. And so I'll say this: nu metal is the best workout music. It's rap, it's rock. What's not to like, folks? All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode.
That is hot.
If you want your questions answered on the pod call, and leave us a voicemail, 866-DTC-2263. Send us a text there. We might read your question on a subsequent episode. So until then, for Tony the Chopper Chopp and Luke the Weatherman Austin, I am Richard the Professor Gaffin. Y'all have a good one.